Admit everybody.
Well, Ashley did contact me today.
Okay, great.
She wasn't sure if she was going to make it. So I asked her to send questions if she wanted to.
There she is, though.
Yeah.
Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
Hi, Hannah.
You joined us.
Yes.
I hope I can make the whole meeting. If not, I will watch the rest of it.
Perfect.
That sounds great. And this is, just kind of a drop-in session. So we'll step through, some of the project background, but it's really just here for you to ask questions or, get more information. And we'll step through the website as well too, where there's a lot of stuff there. So yeah, so stay as long as you can, but don't feel like you have to be here for the whole hour if you can't. So. Hi, Hannah.
I'm excited you guys are doing this.
Yeah, no, great. Happy to.
Hi there. This is Hannah Anderson talking. I'm with the LinkedIn group. Here, I can turn my video on.
Great.
Nice to meet you all. So just dropping in to hear more about the project and pay attention and listen.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. So we had about 6 people sign up or register for that. So let's just give folks a couple minutes to see, if other people join us, and if not, we'll just get going and we'll have a small, intimate meeting. So as we're doing that, Hannah and Ashley, are there specific questions you had or things that you were curious about that we should touch on just to make sure we get all of those points covered?
Go ahead, Hannah, if you have any. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I didn't have any specific questions. I just kind of was hoping to observe and kind of better understand your process for public engagement, public involvement, and kind of coming at it from that lens. This is a relatively new project for me. I don't have a lot of background on it. Moved to the Coeur d'Alene area just earlier this year. So I'm still kind of getting updated on a lot of the different planning processes that are out there.
Great.
Cool.
Well, we will definitely step through that, what we did to get where we are today. So
I am a longtime resident here and love Coeur d'Alene. And this is my really first time really getting involved in the community. I've been to a few city council meetings, but I just want to get more involved. And so whatever you guys are talking, I don't even know what we're talking about today. Other than the vision of Coeur d'Alene, because we keep growing and the growth is great, but it's kind of scary at the same time. And so just wanted to get more involved and see what you guys are thinking and planning and just be more aware.
That's great. Well, and
educated.
Perfect timing, because we've done a ton of work, but there's still work to do. So now's a good time to see what we've been up to for the past 18 months or so. Well, it's 5:35, and so people can certainly join in at any time. I'll manage, the admit to make sure that if people do join in, they can come in. Before we get started, though, let's just do a quick round of introductions. My name's Alex Dupy. I'm with MIG. We're the lead consulting firm for the Envision Coeur d'Alene project, and we've been working with CDA 2030 with Nicole Kaler and Lindsay Beecham, and then the city of Coeur d'Alene, as well as the community at large, to be able to develop this plan for the future vision of Coeur d'Alene over the next many years. Nicole, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. It's nice to have you both here tonight. My name is Nicole Kaler, and I'm the Executive Director of CDA 2030. We are a strategic planning nonprofit here in Coeur d'Alene.
Great. And Sean and Hillary.
Hi, I'm Sean Holm. I'm a senior planner for the city of Coeur d'Alene. I also sit on the project management team for Envision Coeur d'Alene, and I'm here to help however I can.
Hi, I'm Hillary Anderson. I'm the community planning director with the city and been very involved in this project.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Hillary. Lindsay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Lindsay Beecham. I'm the project coordinator for CDA 2030. I'm just here to listen in to see what questions the community has.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. So Hannah and Ashley, you've already introduced yourself, so I won't make you go through it again. But again, this is This is an open conversation, so what we can do is maybe, Sean, I'll turn it over to you just for a moment, and then what we'd like to do is steps through some of the process just to familiarize yourself with that, but then also talk about the website and the virtual open house that we have, and some of the other elements with the plan that you may find interesting or you may have questions about. So Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Alex. So just an FYI for everyone, this meeting is being recorded. We will process it at the end and post it on our website. It'll be located on the resources page as soon as we have the opportunity to do that and post it. I was going to mention that everybody should turn off their cell phones and stuff like that, but we're expecting a larger crowd, so I kind of like the smaller crowd anyway. All right, so we'd like to note that the virtual open house is open as of Monday or Tuesday morning, Monday evening, and it'll be open through July 2nd. And there's multiple ways to participate, so we'll run through that real quick. There are these live drop-in sessions. This is the second one that we've had today. We appreciate you being here. There also is on the Envision Coeur d'Alene site, which is EnvisionCDA.org or .com. It'll get you there, but do not put the www in there. For some reason, the DNS does not like that. So you can get there, just don't put the www in there. So this is where we have the self-guided open house. And the very first portion of that, it describes kind of what Envision Coeur d'Alene is. And then there's a video that we were going to play, but Alex, I think, wanted to walk through that. It's more of a personal touch. And then the plan itself, so there's an additional video and then 4 parts of the plan. Part 1 is background and organization. Part 2 is about Coeur d'Alene. Part 3 is the policy framework and implementation portion. And part 4 is land use and design. So there is a PDF for each one of those that you can open and take a look at where we're at right now, which we encourage you to do. And also part 3 is part of a survey, which is just underneath of that. Oh, I forgot one part here. My older information doesn't have. You can on part 1, 2, and 4, if you have any questions or want to provide any feedback, email me directly and we'll compile all the comments and put those out there. Part 3, as I was mentioning earlier, is the survey that has to do with the policy framework. It is a very long, intense survey, but we've designed it so that you can move through it quickly if you want to, by bypassing areas if you're not interested in reviewing them. So there are 6 different focus areas. At the beginning of each focus area, it'll ask you if you want to take part in that, and you can choose to or bypass that. We encourage everyone to take that. Thank you. The 4th part is the future land use map, and Alex has that up there on the screen. It is, it's a great way to provide feedback on the land use map, the future land use map. You can click anywhere in there. You can zoom in down to neighborhood level, so you can see what area you live in or areas that might concern you. Click on the map, provide information. I don't believe the information is required to comment, but it helps to have that in there, and then provide us your comments. Part 5 is in person or by phone if you're interested. So if you want to meet one-on-one, we are available.
You're talking to me? I can't hear you.
There you go. Keep going, Sean.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can email planningdiv@cda.org, or you can call our main line, which is 208-769-2274. And that is pretty much what the online portion entails.
Great, thanks, Sean. So we have a new meeting participant. Lewis, thanks for coming. We just started, so you're in good shape. Just to kind of get up to speed on where we're at. This is kind of a drop-in session, so we don't have a formal like process that we're working through with this, but I would like to, just step through, some basic information to explain, what this project is. Some of you may have, been part of other parts of the project, but also we're just here to answer any specific questions or, trying to address any concerns that you may have as you see what we're talking about. Louis, as the new person in the group, I'm curious, are you here, do you have a specific issue that you would like to address? I want to make sure that we can cover that.
Louis is one of our planning commissioners, so he's,
okay. Hi,
he's
Louis.
very well versed in this. So thanks for joining us, Louis.
Sorry, Louis, I can't, without a face, it's hard for me to know. So welcome,
Alex,
Louis.
I can't get enough. That's I need more. So I'm just enjoying and wanted to participate and observe and learn more.
Great. Well, Louis, apologies for
no
recognizing
worries.
your name, but thank you for coming.
Of course.
Well, so let's, if it's okay, let's step through just a quick introduction just to talk about kind of how this plan came to be. Some of the public engagement. I know, Hannah, you were asking about our process and how we got to where we are today. So let me just go ahead and launch this real quick. Everything's set up here to make sure I can see everybody and everything. So before we get into some of these pieces, let's just talk a little bit about what Envision Coeur d'Alene is. This is the city's comprehensive plan. And so with that, it is a document that provides really kind of that vision, not just for land use, but for a lot of different elements for how growth and decisions are made over the next 20 years within the city. And I think the unique thing with Envision Coeur d'Alene is that while this provides the city comprehensive plan elements, this is also a really, I think, amazing partnership between the city and CDA 2030 that really focuses on specific actions that can be tracked over time for how you actually implement this comprehensive plan over time. So it's a great partnership and one that I think is pretty unique, but that I'm hoping will be successful as you move forward. The Envision Coeur d'Alene document does address all of the state of Idaho's comprehensive plan requirements. So every city within the state of Idaho does require a comprehensive plan or does need to have a comprehensive plan. And there's 17 specific elements that each comprehensive plan has to address. And so while this is a vision document, it's also addresses the state requirements as well. As I mentioned, this partnership with CDA 2030 and the city provides, a unique way to think about implementation. The state does require an implementation plan as a part of their comprehensive plan requirements. I think the unique thing about this is really those partnerships that are developed between the people that CDA 2030 work with every day and the city itself. So implementation is a big deal with the comprehensive plan, in addition to providing those vision elements that help guide growth over the next 20 years or so. Some things that Envision Coeur d'Alene does not do, it does not change zoning or affect property rights. So we'll talk a little bit about place types in just a moment. Zoning does not change as a part of this comprehensive plan. We provide vision and kind of future growth assumptions or ideas about how that could occur over time, but it doesn't change the underlying zoning right now as a part of this plan. It doesn't change other things that the city does, like building codes or other design requirements. Those are part of your code and your building requirements. The comprehensive plan is a higher level document than that. So those things all stay the same. The future land use map and the implementation strategies do provide a foundation for making decisions. And that is perhaps the most important, or the two most important elements as a part of this document. How do we want to grow over time? What does that look like in the near and distant future? What are the steps that we need to take to be able to achieve those specific goals, vision, and principles, but also, how do we really start to dial in for thinking about specific actions to get where we want to be? So it's an important document, but it's also a document that's at about the 10,000 foot level, whereas some of the other pieces are on the ground, like zoning. Just want to show kind of where we've been. We kicked off this project in September of 2019, back when we were meeting in person. We had an in-person kickoff at the Innovation Den, and we had about 80 or so people there. And I'll show some images just in a moment of what that was. But really starting to think about, what is a future vision or specific vision elements that we would start to build upon throughout this planning process. Throughout the phases, we had a community advisory committee that met a number of times to talk about vision, goals, and strategies, as well as land use. We had 6 focus groups, one tied to each principle within the Envision Coeur d'Alene document. And those principles are things like growth and development, environment and recreation, health and safety, education, jobs and economy, those types of elements that are actually covered in the survey and on other documents. We had a number of surveys. When we first started this project, we were planning to meet in person for pretty much everything. That changed in March, and so we've transitioned to more of an online survey platform. And to be honest, I think we got really amazing feedback through online events. It's definitely a different way to gather engagement, but we had thousands of data points coming through those surveys that we did, and we're hoping to have a strong turnout for the survey we have for this. That brings us to the draft plan and the virtual open house where we're at tonight. And so we have a plan that's in draft form that we want your input on. There's a lot of information in there. But we're hoping that we've been able to break it out into succinct chunks so that it's understandable and provides that roadmap for the community moving forward. This plan is really, it is a plan developed by the community. And just as an example, and this doesn't include the meeting we had earlier today and the meeting this evening, we had about 80 attendees at a public kickoff. We've had a 30-person community advisory committee that met 4 times through this project to look at specific issues and help us make decisions as we move forward. We had 4 public surveys that had over 1,400 participants, as well as the amount of data that came out of those, over 11,000 data points. And when I talk about data points, the way we ran our surveys was that 2 of them were actually about mapping. And so we were able to place points on maps, ask more questions, and I'll show some examples, but really, kind of getting into the nitty-gritty about growth and change and how we talk about that. We met with over 60 community service organizations in the beginning of the project, and then also through the focus group. It's important to think about those groups because they do provide direct service to the community. So what do they see in terms of vision, and what do they need? There's a question in the chat. Hi, Alex, I never received a survey. How do you pick who receives a survey? So the survey was online, and so it was posted through the city's social media accounts, as well as posted. Sean and Hillary, I believe, the newspaper also had run articles about that as well, and so that was online for I want to say each survey was online for about a month each, and so those were through all of the city's social media servers, as well as our public website for the project. So anybody could take the survey. All right. So I'm just going to show a few examples of what we did. When we met with community partners, that's the school district, it's social services, health services folks, environmental interest groups. Those were meetings that we had early on in this project to identify key issues that they felt were important to consider. And these were really just brainstorming sessions that we did over a couple days, but really to try and tease out some of those key elements that might be considered as a part of a vision and an action-oriented plan. During our public kickoff, as I said, we had about 80 folks, and this was great. This was a really fun event held at the Innovation Den, where we actually played a game to talk about growth and change within the city of Coeur d'Alene. This was an interesting way to do it because, while you're thinking about kind of the game of life or chess, it's like, where do you start to place pieces, and what decisions do you need to make? If you change land use, how does that affect transportation? What are the specific elements you should consider for different types of growth, and what growth should we consider to accommodate? So there's just some images of different ways that people developed their maps. Each of these maps went into the Community Advisory Committee, where we actually developed some land use scenarios that we assessed how different growth might occur over time and to help us make decisions moving forward. But then we also broke into, really thinking about those key vision elements. What is Coeur d'Alene in 2040? How does it change over time? What are the challenges to get there? And what are those opportunities that you need to really consider that we can take advantage of? Sorry, Sean, just reading your, great, thank you, Sean. Just reading your chat, make sure I'm catching everything. As I mentioned, we had an advisory committee and focus groups. That was really, those groups performed a lion's share of the work to be able to get here tonight. These are just some examples of the focus groups where we actually took apart all of the policies in the existing comprehensive plan and the CDA 2030 implementation plan and started to reorganize those to be able to put those together and add and modify as needed. And this was a big process for groups. It was one that took a long time, but we went old school and actually cut those pieces together and actually taped them back in. And that formed the foundation of what you see in the policy framework today. So that was the outcomes of some of our first meetings. And then as we met with the advisory committee, this is an example of them where we had talked about some of the vision elements, but then we really started to dive into what was the input, the community input from the online survey, from the public kickoff, to start to develop different types of scenarios that we might consider for land use. How does Coeur d'Alene grow over time? What are the key issues that we should think about? And what are the different types of strategies to consider? The next piece, after we started to develop those scenarios, is to actually come back to you through another survey to talk about what we found out during the kickoff. So we had our first online survey, actually one of our first online surveys that looked at goals and objectives at a very high level to make sure we were, on the right track. And we had about 300 responses or so to that survey, which was great. And that helped provide, that refinement as we're moving forward. We transitioned into looking at what was from that next survey, refining that in a series of actions for priorities, but then also started focusing on growth. If you remember those pictures from the advisory committee where they were looking at those maps, trying to figure out what makes sense, with this survey, we actually asked people to identify where and what type growth should occur within the city. And this really helps us provide that foundation for that future growth map that we're starting to, that we'll be talking about tonight. All right, Mr. Messina is with us, which is great. All right, so with that, that's just a quick summary of some of the engagements. We're obviously in another process right now that will amend with this online open house. But the reason why we're here tonight is to really, kind of make sure that we have the draft plan dialed in for you. And as we move into the next steps, hopefully adoption later this summer, that your input right now is really important because this is the time when we really need to start refining, getting those actions, getting the land use map really dialed in so that when it does go to City Council and Planning Commission, it is, really kind of the community's plan moving forward. So with that, I will stop there and see if people have any questions.
Hello, Tom. This is Sean. Just wanted to welcome you. Saw that you showed up here, so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Hannah, I know you were interested in some of the public engagement pieces. Did you have any questions at all on how we did some of those pieces, or comments or considerations?
Yeah, I might have kind of a twofold. One might be more complicated and one might be easier.
Sure.
The first one, I guess, would be, what's the best way to stay involved or updated going forward? Do you guys have a newsletter? Is it kind of just monitoring the website?
Sean, Hillary, I'll turn that to you. Oh, you're on mute.
Monitoring the website's probably the best way. We do have a large mailing list that we mail out to. if your email address will stay valid, I'm more than happy to add you to that. If you send me your contact info, that's one way to do that. But I noticed I sent out a big email Monday night, and probably 22 of them came back as no longer valid. So probably the best is the website.
We also do updates on social media, and then CDA 2030 has a newsletter that you can join that mailing list as well to get updates on this project and other key projects happening in the community.
Awesome, thank you. And it sounds like you guys had a lot of success in getting, a good amount of feedback, which is a challenge. So good job with that. I know a typical challenge with PI or public involvement is getting, broad spectrum of involvement from folks who might be atypical participants, people with busier lives, who don't have, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 available to go to meetings, stuff like that. Or who just might not be, typically active in government processes or community involvement type of things. So I guess I'm just curious, what successes did you find in meeting people where they are? What sort of avenues were the best that you found for garnering that feedback? Was surveying kind of a result of COVID or a more intentional choice because you've had success in getting feedback that way? Or was it just kind of a silver lining of going virtual versus in person?
Well, I think it's a combination. Obviously with COVID, that changed pretty much every project in the country, if you're looking at public engagement. And so we definitely had to rethink, how we were going to engage fairly early on in this process. I think overall we had always imagined or envisioned doing both online and in-person events through this project. So I think that the change is that we really found that when you're not able to work in person, we actually, not just this project, but in a number of projects, our survey response rates have been quite high. And I think partly it's because we're all stuck on Zoom in many ways, and something that comes across your desk or your email. And we've actually been getting much higher response rates through COVID with surveys than we have typically in the past. And so it's been an interesting, I think, experiment in how online engagement has functioned, but also, acknowledging that we're in a unique time and hopefully coming out of it very soon where we'll be able to meet in person again, because not everybody has a computer, not everybody has social media. People do experience and want to partake in a project in different ways.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Alex, I guess one other thing that we did early on when we could meet in person is we did the pop-up game nights. And
That's
so
right.
we really tried to go to different locations around the city. Some locations were more popular than others. I mean, our best attendance was at the actual launch event, but we did do one at the mall. We did one at which high school? Lake City?
Yes.
High school.
City High School.
We did that, and then we actually had a few that we did some at North Idaho College, and then there was a few other private parties where they asked us to support those, and then the Planning Commission did one as well. So that was, I think, great, where people could kind of schedule it on their time. Mm-hmm. And we could, participate with them in the process. But I think really, the fact that we've done the online and allowed for longer time for people to participate in the surveys and doing different interaction with the mapping tools. And so it's not just the surveys. I think that was really helpful for people, and the fact that it was over a longer duration, or even the Zoom meetings that we found, even with our commission meetings, sometimes that's more convenient for people. They don't have to come down in person to City Hall or the library, where some people feel intimidated, or it's just not convenient if they have young kids or other things they have to deal with at home.
Yeah, I think Alex also mentioned that because of COVID, there was a big change, and so we started looking at things a little bit differently, trying to strategize. But for a while there, everyone was kind of locked down, and so there was a captured audience, if you will. And so I think there was a lot more interaction on Zoom and the surveys and those sorts of things.
No, that's true. And Hillary, thank you for bringing up the game nights. I think that was to kind of, one of the unique things that we did with this project is we actually developed a game specifically for the city of Coeur d'Alene to talk about growth. And so it looked at the city's existing land uses. It built in a lot of those questions that Coeur d'Alene residents were already asking us. And then aside from the kickoff, like Hillary was saying, those game nights were super fun because you could check a box out And I know some people played it at their dining room table, others played it at the mall, or, we had schools, I think fire department played, we had a bunch of different folks who typically wouldn't, come to something like this, actually play this game and get real results. And so it was another unique way to do that. So thanks for reminding me, Hillary. Feels like a long time ago.
It does feel like a long time ago.
And through this game, which sounds really fun, was it more to like ask what your dreams and goals were of Coeur d'Alene, or what were your biggest concerns? What was the main feedback from these people of what's your concern? What are you frustrated with? What did you get out of it as leaders like you guys?
So the game is designed, it's kind of like a role-playing game where there's a city manager, a planner, an engineer, environmentalist, a school teacher, and you all have different roles as a part of this game to build essentially, a growth scenario, or,
Okay.
And so when you look at that, you essentially draw cards and you have to deal with different challenges
Gotcha.
through the area. But also, you do make some assumptions on how much growth should you assume, like what's planned regionally for growth for Coeur d'Alene is one option, and then there's a low and then there's a high. And so then you have to accommodate that depending on what your group chooses. So it was a fun way to kind of think about kind of a complicated subject in a way that kind of brings it down to earth for a lot of folks.
The launch event too, though, we did go broader than just the mapping, Ashley. So we did all kinds of dot exercises and kind of thought bubbles and ask people, what are some of the, kind of the SWOT analysis, looked at kind of, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and ask people what are they concerned with, and then what's your future vision, what's desired, and how can we achieve that. And we've continued that work through the surveys and with the advisory committee and the focus groups, just to make sure that we are capturing all of those things.
Yeah, and what was the biggest concern out of the majority of those surveys and the feedback?
So I'd say the biggest concern is, people look at this from their own personal lens. And so usually the response we would get is, put the growth outside of my neighborhood, or those sorts of things. It was really surprising to see some of the results of that game, actually. So there are certain game sets or groups where they put most of their results or most of their growth, outside of the city and in our ACI, which is the area of city impact that the city can annex into. And some others didn't put any growth outside of current city limits and put all the growth inside. And so, are you looking for that map?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ashley, if you're interested, if you go to the resources page on the website, all of the information, all of the summaries from not just the open house, but also economic development analysis, all the various meetings that we've had, those are all in this area. And then this kickoff event, this is one. I think the mapping should be here as well, right, Sean? Yeah,
that's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are some of the game results. And so people play stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
We do have that in PDF form where you can toggle on and off each one of the different types of growth, but we couldn't get our website to display that or have the ability to toggle those on and off individually. So we thought we would post it with all of the results. So
it looks jumbly, but when you start to tease it apart, it does start to come together. All right. Well, with that, any other questions on? Let's see. Henny, you had a comment. Giving those options is great. How did you advertise for those events, community partnerships? From the advertisement, I could start. Then Sean, Hillary, Nicole. I know we developed a series of press releases and other materials for the city to disseminate. And so Sean and Hillary, Nicole, do you want to talk about how you've been getting the word out or how you got the word out for those previous events?
Sure, I'll go first because mine's fairly quick because I'm not too much into social media. But the project website for me, the list of CAC, the focus groups, that generated list from here where we got people to sign up initially when we first kicked off, I sent that out.
Yeah, the press release, I mean, kind of the standard things you would use. Obviously, the social media is huge, and the press releases, and try to work with the press to make sure to get the word out, and then contacting the different neighborhood groups and community partners. And then of course, asking, as Sean mentioned, we have a list of the CAC and focus group members, but asking people to share it with their network. So I think that's how we've been so successful. And then CDA 2030, again, through their newsletters and the chamber newsletter, we've been able to spread information, the city's newsletter that's online in hard copy format. Nicole, what are we missing?
I think you covered most of it. The other thing that has really helped is capturing some of those Facebook groups that people are really active in, and making sure to post the events to those groups, those active ones.
Yeah, the whole reason why I found about this is through a Facebook group called Responsible North Idaho Growth. I don't know if you've been in contact with them, but that's how Ed's really involved in the Hayden City Council and the annexation of Hayden and how Hayden's growing. And so that's how I found out about this one, just to become more involved. So I think the Facebook groups are awesome.
Yeah, they're really helpful at spreading the word, which is great, because that's what we want, is the community participation.
Yeah, and I think that the word definitely got out. We had over 1,000 responses from the community priority survey, which was a big survey. It looked at both, kind of the action items as well as all of the land use features. And so, 1,000 responses for that is we're pretty happy with that. So I think the groups were definitely spreading the word amongst themselves as well too, which was great.
1,000 doesn't seem like a lot though. Like, our city's so big, and you only get 1,000 participants.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
That's pretty good for a city this size.
Our surveys go, so overall, we're probably closer to about 3,000 people have been involved in the project in total. So you're right. I mean, it's a city of 55,000. That doesn't seem like that much, but for surveying and community engagement, that's a lot. Some communities, may get like 300 people max or less, 50 people involved, so
wow,
quite good about, I mean, not everyone wants to take the time, so it's great you guys
take
care. And
like even tonight there was 17 people that were interested and a bunch that had signed up, and here we are, and a handful of people. So
well, let's talk about the draft. Do you want to talk about the draft land use map? I think that's the new, kind of the big new piece of the comprehensive plan. The policy framework we can certainly discuss too, but it's dense, and I would suggest the survey is a great way to take a look at that and provide input. But let's talk about the draft land use map here, just so you can get a sense of what this is. So I think some of these slides, we've already talked about that. This is all part of that slide, but these presentations were developed as videos that are also on the website. So you can go back and you can watch these again as videos with narration. So if you have questions after this meeting, all of these things that I'm showing you tonight are clickable, and you can go back and read and listen to them. So we know that doesn't change zoning or affect property rights. I think that's the most important thing, particularly for this slide deck, is that place types are not zoning. They're future growth vision for the city. Again, lots of public engagement on this. So let me just stop here for a moment. When we started talking about land use, and this really began with the public kickoff back in September 2019, all of those games and that people played and the maps that the Community Advisory Committee helped develop came into essentially 3 different scenarios that we evaluated using different scenario planning tools. And so, even looking at 30 different game results, with a lot of people reviewing it, they really started to focus on 3 different land use kind of orientations. And so the first one, corridor, that really looks at growth along future highways and corridors. That's probably the most similar to what the existing land use pattern within Coeur d'Alene is today. But then we also looked at what people were saying about wanting to be able to walk to services, wanting to have more diverse housing options, wanting to have employment nearby. So with that, and using those maps that people developed, we developed 2 other scenarios. One is a district type of scenario that looks at placing specific areas within a city that would have, amenities and services in addition to housing and employment. So they're little nodes throughout the community. And then compact, which is the most I think kind of focused of the scenarios, really focuses land use within the central portion of Coeur d'Alene. And so, where instead of kind of reaching out or looking at little nodes here and there, it really just focuses on that central portion. And so none of these, were the final land use map. They were ways for us just to test options. There are ways to pick and choose kind of, what if we change this land use to this? How would that affect other locations? It's also a way for us to look at traffic and transportation and what the potential impacts might be with these different scenarios. So kind of the building blocks of these scenarios are place types, and these are actually part of the future land use map, and I'll break this down in just a second. The place types started early on in this process, looking at existing zoning and then generalizing what single family housing or commercial might look like. They really started to form the building blocks of what that future land use map would be. And they've been modified over time with this project, but they started as a part of this early kickoff phase. And for each place type, they provide general guidance for the type of growth located within those areas. So like this one, for example, compact neighborhood, it talks about kind of the key characteristics, transportation choices, different types of uses that you might expect to find within these areas. And I think the important thing for this is that it also identifies compatible zoning. So the place type thinks about future growth, what the future might look like. The zoning really applies to what can happen today. And so using that compatible zoning line, we're able to tie the place type and zoning together. So let's just step through this briefly. We can come back to any of these if you have questions, because I know there's a lot on here. So the future land use map is about developing a vision for future growth within the city. Again, it doesn't change zoning underneath, but it does look at, over the course of 20 years, where do we want growth to focus? What type of growth would that be? How does that affect existing residential neighborhoods or not? And so this land use map helps provide guidance for the city and for the community to be able to think about that as growth happens over time. And so with these place types, single family neighborhood is the lowest density neighborhoods. And you'll see some areas in light yellow are within the city limits. That's kind of bluish dash line. But a lot of those areas are outside of the city limits, but within the area of city impact. That's the red line around the corner or around the outside. And those areas, the reason why we're looking at lower density development out there is because most of that area is pretty challenged topographically, or for transportation or sewer and infrastructure. So single family residential is really probably what we'll be developing out there in the future, with some of the exceptions of some of those existing areas within the city. I think it's important to mention as I step through these that particularly for single family neighborhoods, and they could have a variety of place types, the existing place types really reflect what's on the ground today. So when we talk about future land use, it's not really about redevelopment within neighborhoods because there's not a lot of vacant land. There is some vacant parcels here and there that might get another single family home. But for the most part, single family residential, we left essentially as single family residential. So just some different examples of what some of that looks like, kind of what you'd expect, typical single family home, some bigger, some smaller. There's other areas within the city of Coeur d'Alene that are compact and urban neighborhoods, and compact and urban, those are also single family neighborhoods, and you can see this with different development types already within those areas, that there's single family, but there's also some duplex, triplex, there's some townhome. So this place type reflects, a slightly more diverse type of housing that you're already seeing within some of those areas. So these place types essentially reflect, again, what's going on there today. As areas, if areas redevelop, some existing areas have very low density existing development, but are actually zoned for much higher uses. You might see some of these areas transition over time, but for the most part, single family neighborhoods will be single family neighborhoods in the future. Another place type, and this is one that's new to the city, but one that we heard, throughout the community involvement process, as well as, looking at existing plans that the city has already developed, is really providing some of those mixed use nodes throughout the area. And those are primarily located along corridors, and they're located in areas where existing large format retail, like big box retail, has either really large parking lots, it's vacant, it's underdeveloped. Those are areas that we expect could transition over time into more mixed use types of development. And what I mean by mixed use, it's usually retail on the bottom with office or housing on top. It could also be standalone retail with apartments adjacent. So there's two things. There's one called vertical and one called horizontal mixed use. They can be developed in a variety of different ways, but the kind of the key piece with mixed use development is that it provides services near housing. It provides services and housing near transportation. And depending on where you're at within the city and what mixed use district we're talking about, that could be a variety of scales. So this is just an example. This is actually State Street in Boise. And we did a project there a couple of years ago. And I'm showing this example because from a mixed use standpoint, this is kind of how we would expect potentially redevelopment to occur. This is an older strip style commercial development. There's some existing uses in there that are still using that, but lots of parking, lots of vacancies. And so over time, it doesn't mean that all of those uses go away, but it means that some of the uses transform. And so when we look at reorganizing parking in some of these areas to still provide that parking, but to maybe not provide it right at the street, maybe to provide it behind a building or in different locations. These are the types of developments that the community was really telling us they desire in the future for some of these areas. Downtown is obviously very important for the city. We left that as is. This is essentially your downtown district today. We didn't really make many changes with that, really just kind of carrying that forward with the growth and the kind of the development, both on as a main street as well as a strong residential and commercial area. Then the other couple, when we looked at where industrial might happen, manufacturing. There are some strong industrial and manufacturing locations within the city, and those are in blue. We maintain those and just assign them a place type of industrial. But we started to think about that retail center corridor. Those are areas that, those purple areas, those are areas that have very strong kind of retail center focus. But we also looked at how do those relate to some of those future mixed use development locations in the future. So if you think about how much general commercial you have today, we started to balance that between still providing that commercial, but also looking at those mixed use areas as well to think about different land use types in the future, particularly through redevelopment. There's some examples, all different scales, different types. This is some of the ones we're seeing like in commercial at the bottom right. Those are areas potentially, if developed as mixed use, that's a lot of parking that's unused. So how do you better use the space? And then just a couple others. Employment was a big conversation throughout the process. And so this employment center implements the healthcare corridor, some of the other plans that the city has, but really starts to focus on where you have strong employment now, specifically office or flex space or other innovation areas. And so we brought those areas into this as an employment center. Hannah, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm seeing the kind of dark blue line there and then the orange. Is the orange the ACI and the blue is the city?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, just some other examples. And so for a lot of these, it's actually acknowledging, plans that the city has already developed over time, but just kind of moving those forward to make sure that we capture those as a part of the future land use map. And then two others, civic is primarily public. So those are your public amenities, parks, schools, churches, city hall, library, those spaces. There are a limited number of examples here where there's private open space that's also been identified as civic because they're required to provide public access. But generally, these are your civic spaces, which include, all your park and public space, but also things like schools and, the NIC campus, down near the water. And then finally, plan development. And so Sean, I'm going to turn it to you to talk about plan development.
All right. Make sure I'm not on mute.
You're good.
So as part of our development here, and most cities do this, is they allow for what's called a planned use development, which is you must bring forward a plan to the city. It's a master plan, basically, that's reviewed by Planning Commission. And if it's approved, it can alter certain things, such as driveway lengths and street widths and setbacks and heights. It doesn't necessarily change density, but it allows for a different form of development. And so we felt like there was no specific place type that fit planned unit developments. And so we took the existing ones and applied them and amalgamated them together into one single map. So that is what this reflects, are all the planned unit developments within the city. And you can see the one kind of to the right of Tubbs Hill, that is the golf course, the Coeur d'Alene golf course. So you have neighborhoods, you have marinas, all waterfront developments that have been approved, Coeur d'Alene Place, those types of things are planned unit developments.
Hannah, did you have another question?
No, I didn't. Thank you. But now that I'm on, I guess I'm curious, what's the top left, the more eastern or western section, that big green up there?
This up here?
Yeah.
That's Coeur d'Alene Place.
Oh, okay. Got it.
I'm in the landings. Why isn't that on there?
That was not a PUD, right?
Yeah, I believe that's R8 for the most part.
Right.
Your regular type subdivision.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the subdivisions that don't have the PUD designation. It's just the ones that do, that ask for some of those concessions, like Sean said. And in exchange, they have to provide a minimum of 10% open space that sometimes is open to the public. And then like the Atlas waterfront is a new example of a PUD, so that mixed use. So some of the PUDs have a variety of commercial and residential uses as well.
Okay, so what am I zoned in? R8? Is that what you said?
Yes, I believe so. I don't know exactly without having your specific address. I want to. Yeah, I don't want to speculate.
It's probably R8.
Okay.
It's most likely R8 or R12.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Ashley, for that, from a place type standpoint, if you're curious, stepping back, maybe here. Let's bring it back here. R8 would fit into one of the compact and urban neighborhood developments, I believe. So I think our single family residential is R3 and maybe R5, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And so when you see here, a lot of the development like yours, I'm assuming you live in a single family home. Is that? Yeah,
we're like right at the end of your blue dotted line, like we're right off of Prairie.
Okay. Yeah, so these types of place types would be consistent with the type of development you live in today.
Okay.
So those are place types in a nutshell in the future land use map, and that's a lot of information. Are there questions at all about that?
No, I guess that'd be a separate conversation with Sean that I can schedule.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Yeah, no problem. And if there are questions about, kind of going back to the online open house, if you do have questions or comments, this map element is a great way to be able to provide that. So all you do is just click on it and you put your name and add your comment. That goes into a database so that we we know what comments are coming in. That helps us refine the land use map as we step into the adoption process. But also the presentation that I just showed, there is a video if you're interested in that, as well as reading that. There's a document that you can download as well too. That's part 4 that provides narrative of all of this information as well if you're interested.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's actually true for all of these parts. So we're almost at 6:30. We have a few minutes left. Any other questions or comments? Happy to stick around.
Yeah, so have you gotten to the implementation strategies portion yet? I forget where that was on the timeline.
We have, and actually the survey here, click here to take the survey. That will take you directly to the survey that has all of the implementation actions. So that goes from, you know, vision to principle all the way down into implementation. And so this, as Sean mentioned earlier, this is a big survey. So you can certainly step through each piece, and there's 6 principles. You can step through each piece, or you can go to the next one and jump through to be able to respond to the ones that you want to respond to, or you can respond to all of them as well. Is that correct, Sean? Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. So at the beginning of each focus area, it'll ask you if you would like to participate in that, and it lists the number of actions in there that you can review. And so if that floats your boat, then have at it.
So let's give it a try. So I would like to rate the 35 actions in community identity. So I'm gonna click yes. I go next. And then you'll see all of the goals, objectives, and actions listed here, and then you can rate them as you want, whether it's high or low priority. And you can do that for as many or as few as you want, and then go on to the next one if you want, or open-ended responses. Sean put a lot of work into this. Looks great, Sean. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me, maybe since we have just a couple minutes, let me just remind, kind of this open house. Certainly, Ashley, you're welcome to set up a call with Sean or others in the planning department to talk about if you have specific questions. I think he put his information in the chat. Is that correct, Sean? I think you put it in there if I saw earlier. Yep.
Yes, it is there.
Great. So, just as a reminder for, what's in here, there's, we've done the live drop-in session. We're just wrapping that up, but there's lots of other information in here. So there's videos that you can watch if you want to watch videos for each part. Talks about the plan and its organization, future land use and public engagement. Also talks about the policy framework if you're interested. You can take the survey, which is the one that I just showed that helps us rank all of the action items that are in the implementation plan right now. And then you can also provide input on the draft land use map if you have specific questions or concerns as we move forward. And you can see here, some people have actually started to put some notes like this comment here, comment 1, talking about I-95 and thinking about an express lane. He was actually at one of our earlier meetings. So we're starting to get comments start to roll in within the survey, within this section, which is great. And so if you provide comments, you'll see those too.
Alex?
Yes.
It looks like Hannah asked a question in the chat, and I can answer some of that. So in the very beginning, we did look at what we thought are, peer cities or cities that we thought were doing a great job. We looked at those cities. They are also a part of the economic portion of our, if you scroll down just to there, right there, that economic development analysis talks about peer cities that we looked at, and we compared ourselves economically to them. We also looked to some other cities like Madison, Wisconsin, and what they were doing with their plans. And so we have looked at what other places are doing.
Yeah, that's a great question, Hannah. There was a lot of benchmarking done, particularly on the market and kind of competitive placement analysis. How does Coeur d'Alene stack up against other places in terms of, desirability, education, housing, all of those pieces. And that really formed a lot of the basis for the jobs and economy section, objectives and action items, but also for education and some of the other pieces that help support some of that. So that's a great question, and one that we spent a fair bit of time on. So I'd encourage you to look at that if you're interested.
Awesome, thank you. I will.
Nicole, do you have anything to add on that response?
No, I think that's good.
All right. Well, we're right at 6:30. So I want to just appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much. I know it's dinner time and it's nice out and there's a lot of stuff going on. So I appreciate the hour or so that you spent with us. Is there anything else we can answer before we close it out for the evening?
I feel like my question's going to be kind of in depth though. So as you guys are planning this, what is the actual end goal for Coeur d'Alene 2030? Like, what do you guys see in 2030? Like, how many people are living here? How many more developments are going to be established? What's the infrastructure going to look like? And because we all moved here because we love a smaller community space, and it is growing like hell. And not like hell, but I mean, growth is good. I'm a capitalist. I understand growth and economy, and I think that's great. But like, what is the end vision for 2030? Like, are we going to double our size? I don't know. I just am so new to this that these are all the questions I'm asking in my head.
No, I think those are great questions, and catch us right at the end, Ashley, with the big heady question.
Well, that's why I wanted to listen to this, because I have no idea. Like, what is the end goal for Coeur d'Alene?
I'd say, I don't know that end goal is probably the right term for it. Cities
probably not. Cities growing.
Cities evolve over time, and I think what we heard loud and clear through the community process is that people really enjoy the small town feel of Coeur d'Alene, but also acknowledgement that it is growing very fast and it's getting very expensive. And
I understand that.
And so I think the hope with the implementation strategies that CDA 2030 is working on with the future land use map, that growth will continue to occur, but hopefully will occur in a way that still preserves some of those qualities that keep Coeur d'Alene. And it's definitely, it's not just a Coeur d'Alene issue, like you were saying about Hayden and other areas, Post Falls. All of those locations are growing like gangbusters, and so trying to kind of, maybe organize is the wrong term, but trying to push in certain directions to get what you want out of that is part of, I think, what this plan is meant for. Hillary, Sean, would you say that's a fair assessment?
I just want to clarify, and then I'm sure Sean will want to speak up as well. One point of clarification, so CDA 2030 is the organization. The plan is Envision Coeur d'Alene. It's a little confusing. And the plan is through the year 2040, basically, or 2041. It's a 20-year plan. We're projected by 2040 to reach 85,000 for our population, and we're currently at 55,000. So it's not going to double. We actually, even though the Kootenai County as a whole is growing at a really high percentage, we've continued to grow at a steady rate. We're closer to 3% annually. So it's not that high in the city of Coeur d'Alene. So, I guess recognize that, but we are working with our regional partners on other issues related to housing and growth and transportation as well. Just recognizing that, we're seeing some strains, obviously, and a lot of, impacts on housing and transportation, all of that because of growth. So I think this plan really sets us up well for the next 20 years, but we will evaluate it in another 7 to 10 for kind of looking at land use and all of that. But the action items will be reviewed annually. We'll be working with CDA 2030 and other community partners to keep that part of living document. So looking at what are community priorities to achieve this big vision for Coeur d'Alene, maintain the things like, quality of life, small town feel, all of that, neighborhoods, good schools.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll participate in the surveys and be more involved then, for sure.
That's great.
Yeah, I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Well, no, and thank you for the time tonight. So with that, maybe it's time to eat dinner. So let's let's go ahead and do that. So again, thank you so much for it. Make sure you stay involved. Check the website. We will be going through a public adoption process, in the coming months, and so we hope you'll stay involved and keep checking to make sure that it's on the right track. So thank you for all the time.
Thank you, guys.
Sean, Hillary, Nicole, close us out. All right. Good.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.